Welcome. I'd like to call the meeting to order with pledge of allegiance, please. Roll call, we're all present. And need to approve the agenda for June 12th, 2018. Anybody has any changes or anything?
I'll second that.
I got a motion, a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Correction, it's July 10th. There was a misprint.
That's my error, trying to get out of here for 4th of July.
Approved minutes from June 12th. Anybody got any changes or?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
We got a motion, a second to approve the minutes from June 12th. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed with all present. For the ordinance, John, we should open the public hearing first, or?
Yeah, you can lead with the notice of public hearing.
We got a notice of public hearing. The Way Park Planning Commission will hold a public hearing at City Hall, 19 13th Avenue North at 6:30 soon thereafter on Tuesday, July 10th, 2018, to hear the following request. The request of the City of Way Park to amend City Ordinance 55 telecommunication freestanding tower regulations related to setback and fall zone requirements in industrial districts, including but not limited to Ordinance 55.5 tower setbacks. Public meeting opens up at 6:32.
Progress since. They'd have the option, excuse me, or they would have the option to, in lieu of us meeting the standard setback, submit a fall zone letter that certifies that it would fall down on itself and we could limit the need for that setback. This would not impact the setback from residential districts, because that's a separate setback requirement. They, as of right now, the sites are looking at can meet those without issue, and I don't think I'd be in favor of reducing that setback requirement just for kind of separation and aesthetic purposes between residential and industrial uses, because in the areas we're looking at, those are uses that do abut each other in some cases. But as of right now, it's not an issue, and I don't anticipate that would be, and if it did come up, I don't think I would be in favor of necessarily changing that at this point. I will put the text amendment on the screen here. It's pretty basic, and I kept it that way intentionally. What I was looking at is that essentially that we add the language that allows they have to meet the 125% of the tower's height unless they opt to submit a fall letter by a registered professional engineer, in which case we can forego that, but the standard setback would apply of the district, the underlying district, and that's more for the accessory type building. Usually that's going to be in the order of 20 or 30 feet, depending on the district or the area or which side of the property it's on, but that's pretty easily achievable in most cases. And that's really the crux of what we're looking at, and I think it's a reasonable request, and I'd rather do it like this, because I do think it opens up some flexibility. Not that we get a lot of requests, but we've tried to keep the larger towers to our industrial or agricultural areas, and those areas are kind of dwindling where we can locate those. So I think to perhaps limit some of the pressure to go in other districts, this might be a reasonable alternative for the time being. So that would conclude my report. We can open up for questions. I know we haven't had a lot of interest from the public or anything, but there is a representative from the firm I've been working with here tonight to speak on kind of the specifics of the fall letter or that engineering detail if it comes up.
Thank you for your report, John. Would you like to address the board?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Eddie Buell. I work with Buell Consulting. We're working with T-Mobile and the Tower Company on this project. Director Nurnberg summarized, kind of the background really well. So basically what we're hoping this would do is to allow us to locate these towers in the industrial properties kind of in the corners where the property owners would like to see them go. That way we're able to find properties with willing landowners. Initially, when we were looking at this and the setbacks, it seemed like the highest tower we were going to be able to go would be about 70 feet, which would certainly work for T-Mobile's coverage and possibly another carrier in the future. But if this were to be adopted, we'd be able to design a tower that's 150 feet tall. That way it would be able to accommodate 3-4 carriers, giving them all high enough center lines that they can add it into their system and work. Some sites, they only need 60 feet. Sometimes they need 120. So, this kind of flexibility will hopefully result in fewer towers that are able to accommodate multiple carriers. The fall letter, I just wanted to bring a couple examples of what they typically look like. Those are 2 different letters from 2 different tower manufacturers. The letters come directly from the tower manufacturers, not from the carrier or the tower owner. These come directly from the manufacturer to ensure that it's designed as they say. So any questions on that, I'm happy to answer as well. But these are letters that we can get upon request, and they change if we are at a site where we think we can be 100 feet from the property line, we could design a 150-foot tower with a 100-foot fall radius. In another case, if it's only 50 feet, we can do the same height of the tower and just get a different fall letter. It's a little bit more expensive of a tower design when it's hinged in such a way that the fall zone is less, but it's always possible to get a no radius, a 0-foot fall to collapse right upon itself. That's not always a given. They kind of have the option when they're siting these sites to figure out what sort of fall zone they'll need. any questions or anything?
Yeah, in the event that, there's a failure in the fall litter, who is responsible for the liability?
That is a good question. I have not had that come up before. I believe because the tower manufacturer is signing this as a professional engineer, that it's going to collapse in this way. I believe if it wouldn't do that, that would fall on the tower manufacturer.
And, and if the tower manufacturer is out of business, or, who?
The tower owner, in this case, would be EcoSite. They carry general liability insurance. I believe it's $2 million aggregate insurance, and so they would be the party responsible then.
Okay.
We can also address that somewhat, and if this amendment would be approved ultimately, we would look at incorporating probably firmer language to that effect as far as responsibility and the future conditional use permit requests.
And I know that in other jurisdictions, we've certainly been asked to provide a COI, certificate of insurance, showing that the tower owner is covered for those sorts of incidents. And so that certainly would be something we could include in an application for a CUP.
Is the cost, what am I trying to ask here? Let's say somebody wants to put up a 75-foot tower, would that even fall into these regulations? Or this, the discussion here?
Yeah, any freestanding
Okay.
antenna or tower would fall under it. I mean, if it's something of that level height, they may,
I guess what I'm
the
leading-
shorter it is, the less likely it is to need to address a setback issue.
Yeah. Is it that much more expensive to put up a tower with the fall litter?
It really depends on what the fall zone radius is going to be. As said, if it's only going to be 100 feet, that wouldn't be very much. But if it's going to be, 10 feet, that would be more expensive. I'd
Okay.
hate to throw out numbers, but I would assume the difference would be in the high tens of thousands.
Oh, okay. So it would be significant enough to,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, but in this, case, this project is, EcoSite is the tower owner, and it's in their best interest to build a tall tower because the more carriers go on it, that's kind of their business model. So they are
Right,
really
yeah.
interested in designing a taller tower that can accommodate 4 carriers.
The purpose of my question was just to determine whether or not it would be worth making this a unilateral ordinance that everybody had to, fall into that. But if it's going to be that kind of an expense, no, that's not a
Right.
reasonable thought.
Right, yeah, I think the way John, wrote it up was that if you don't need a fall, if you can meet the 125%, then there would be no need for it.
Yeah, it just gives an option. And really what we're looking at it is, the intent, the way it's written, is to keep it on the property. I mean, as you push closer to the edge, you're gonna need probably more specific engineering, but, the main thing is that it's not crossing into other property or endangering anyone else. So if you're 100 feet away, versus the 150 or something, you may not need that perhaps level,
Sure.
by saying that correctly. But if you want to get closer, then it's going to probably ramp up a little bit more accordingly.
Okay.
This also may have a potential benefit in allowing these towers to be sited maybe a little bit further away from rights of way or visibility. The most recent one we've done, which was some years ago now, probably 3 or 4 years ago, was the one at Horizon Roofing. And if this were an option, that would be pushed further back and further away from the road, or at least it could have been. And whether or not that is of consideration, that's probably up for debate. But I think some people, if given the option, would rather have them a little bit further away from the road or back in a corner.
Okay. No, I mean,
Just for reference, that one out on our property is nearly 500 feet tall. That was put up 20 years ago, and that has that provision on it. That's designed to fall straight down, yep.
Yeah, the ones in the ag districts, we allow for those too, of course, but they're probably, because the areas are just much more wide open, they're probably less of a concern, but that would apply in that area too if it did come up. And eventually we'll see some similar request in an ag area, again, that's, that's fairly certain for perhaps a taller one. I think it does open up options, I think that the engineering and things have progressed probably since some of these went up years ago, and I think it's a reasonable request. I'd rather look at the amendment and set it up for future requests to allow flexibility rather than doing a one-off variance when it's likely it could potentially come up again and for discussion. It achieves the same effect in my mind, so, as far as protecting the adjacent properties, so I think it's reasonable.
Anybody else have any questions, or?
Fairly straightforward. Seems common sense, I mean, to try to allow some of these people to put it in some of the areas where it's difficult to do so, if that's their wish and there's a way around it. Common sense to me.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second?
We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Closed at 6:47. Commissioners got any discussions, or?
I would like to recommend that, make a motion of recommendation of approval for the amendments for the tower ordinance.
I'll second
printed.
that.
We got a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed with all present. Other business.
I don't have anything additional for this evening, aside from just to mention that it's perhaps against our wishes, but it's Sheila's last meeting, so I just wanted to thank her for all the work she's done and being part of the planning commission here in my time and long before me, and being kind of our foundation around the office and helping me out with so much stuff.
Thank you.
This is where we can call for her to have a speech.
Yeah.
Get a motion for adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Got that?
We got a motion and a second for adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Meeting adjourned, 6:48.